Welcome to our next video on Python graphics. We're creating a data entry form today. And this is the form we're going to be creating. And you can see here, we have got some labels, we've got some input boxes, we've got two radio buttons, we've got a button over here, and we've got a frame over here. We've also got a title over here. So we need to actually work our way through each one of these to show it, to demonstrate that we can do each one of these. So how do we program this so that we can get it like that? So we're going to refer back to this diagram here to help us understand and help us how to make this particular form. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get our data entry labels, our entry widgets, our frame, our radio buttons, our button, and our title. We're going to get them into the program as fast as we possibly can. So it's absolutely essential you do this kind of thing in a fast, efficient way. So let's have a look how we do that. So we start the program in the normal way of creating Kinter objects. So we say from Kinter import, and then we've got the root created, and then we've got, this is how we create a title for the actual Kinter program or the root. So we go root.title and then just immediately put the text in inverted commas. Now we're actually going to set up our different things. So we've got to have our labels, we've got to have our widgets, we've got to have our frames, our buttons, etc. So what if we were to put hashes and comments and then do each one systematically? That's certainly going to help us. So I'm setting these up right now. So what I've created is a list of comments. We've got labels, we've got two there. We've got widgets, entry widgets, so we've got two of them. We've got one frame, we've got two radio buttons, we've got one button itself, and we've got several grid positions for each one of these. So 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we've got 8 positions for those. We're also going to have to create some space. So space stuff. Now that one there, that one there probably needs to go up well before the grid position. So I'm just going to copy that in and put it there. And so we create our stuff and then we position our stuff. We don't position our stuff then create our stuff. Okay, so let's work on how to do each of these. Now you already know how to deal with a label, so I'm just going to quickly make those labels here so you can see what's going on. Now what I've done here is I've created the first name label and the surname label, and I've called them that because it's logical. And then the syntax for that is label, root, text, etc. Now I haven't done any formatting from it and I haven't even put them in yet. So the next thing is to actually put those same things in the grid positions down here. So upon running it, we can see here is the actual label, and down here is the grid position, and there is row 1, row 0, column 0, row 1, column 0, and so it's placed at one under each other. It's really important to set this out beautifully like this so that you can really see what's going on. Now we're going to create our data entry widgets, and we've done this before, so I'm going to show you it very, very quickly. So now we can see here the widgets, the first name entry widgets, and you can follow that syntax there. It's just the variable name plus entry, open brackets, root. So we put it in the root and then we give it a width. So this width here is about 20. It means 20, maybe capital M's or something like that. And then the surname, it's the same thing. And then we need to insert it so that we can have first name in here and surname in here. So that's how we get the actual surname in here and first name in here, so that we can actually add information in there. Okay, also you'll notice how I have placed my grid positions down here. So here's the first name entry grid, and we've got row column 1, so it's over here, not in column 0. So the next thing that we need to do is deal with the frame. Okay, so this is a little bit different, so let's explain this. Now the frame, we can call this anything. So I'm going to call this my frame. So is equal to, and it's a label. It's a special kind of label. Label frame. Okay. And we open our brackets and close our brackets. And we're going to put this into the root. Then we're going to have some text, which is equal to, I don't know, gender. And then we're going to give it some padding around it. So we've got some space around it. And the way to do this is go pad X is equal to, say, 50, comma, and pad Y is equal to, say, 50. And that gives us some space around it. Now, we're not going to be able to see that frame straight away because we haven't put anything in it. But first we do need to actually go down and place the frame into the grid. So my frame dot grid, open brackets, row equals, and in this case we're talking row 2. Okay, row 2, and we're going to have it in column 0. So now, if I ran this, it's actually going to not quite show up. So what I need to do is I need to put something in it so that it can show up. So what we are going to be putting into it is radio buttons. So let's explain those now. So we've got 2 radio buttons that we are going to be putting in. Now, before I create the radio buttons, I've got to create a variable. And it's slightly different to normal variables, but not a great deal of difference. Okay, so I'm going to call this Roland, just because I can. I can call it anything I like, and my name is Roland, and welcome. Okay, so the first variable is going to be called Roland, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it an int var variable. And what that is it makes it an integer variable. It's basically saying every time you press one of these radio buttons, it's going to give a value that is a whole number. We can actually do string variables with it as well, but we need to force it to be an int variable or a string variable. But we're going to force this to be an int variable. And then we create our radio buttons. Radio button. And what we're going to do is we're going to put it inside the frame, and the frame is called my frame, so I'm going to say my frame, and so I'm not putting it in the root, I'm putting it inside the frame. And then I'm going to say text is equal to, in this case it's going to be male, and we'll make that capitals, it's just going to be easier from a formatting point of view, male. And then we're going to say variable is equal to Roland. Okay, and so that's actually referring to this, and that's how we deal with variables in this particular case. You're actually declaring that the variable is equal to this particular variable over here, and we're going to give it a value of 1 for this particular variable. So that's the simple thing we're going to do there. And what we're going to do with this radio button is we are going to immediately put it into a grid position. And the reason we're doing it here is it makes it much easier in the end to deal with. So we're just going to go grid row equals 0, and we're going to put the column equal to 1. I want it a bit further than normal, basically. And I'm going to grab this whole text here. I'm going to go over here, and this time I'm going to make this female, and this one will give a value of 2, and this one will change the row to row 1, and so that also is in my frame. Let's run this and see what happens. Oh, we've got an exception. We've got a problem that's not worked. There's something wrong with this, so let's have a look at this. All right, so I've had a look at this. What my problem is, I've put a capital B in here. I need to actually make it a lowercase thing. It's a reserved word and it needs to be correctly spelled. Let's run it again. Okay, so what we've got is we've got our radio button over here. It's not looking any good at the moment, but it certainly is there. And we've got our frame there with gender over here, and it's starting to look what it should. The next thing I have to do is a button. So I'm going to create a button right here, and I'm going to call it collect button, and it's a button. And we've seen buttons before, so it's in the root directory. Its text is enter your details, and I've put a pad X of 25 and a pad Y of 20 around it. So I've quickly placed that collect button into the program by doing a grid and putting it at row 3 and column 2. Now let's run it and see what it's looking like. So I've got my button over here, I've got my frame here, I've got my option buttons here, I've got my input boxes over here, and I've got my labels here, I've got my title here. So this is starting to look right, but what I'm not doing is I'm not seeing good spacing. So the first thing I need to do is I need to start looking at my spacing and try and set that up so that it looks good. So the first thing I want to do is I want to actually set my spacing up so that before what is your first name, what is your surname, and what is your gender, we've got some space running down here. And the way I need to do that, this has been set up already. If you have a look over here, it's been set up where it goes from row 0 and column 0. We need to move it to the right to column 1. So this is where we having the grid positions are going to be very helpful. So we're moving everything over one column, and to do this we just click on here, move that to 2, move that to 2, move that to 1, move that to 3, and immediately all of those are moved over, but you can't see that yet. The reason you can't see that is because we haven't placed anything now into column 0. And so we need to place some space into column 0. So this is where we go to space stuff, and we're going to call this first column space equals label. So we're just making it a label, and we're saying, well, the text for this label, we're putting it in the root, and then we're going to make the text for this label spaces, and depending on how many spaces we go as to how far this is going to go wide. So I've placed maybe 6 spaces there, and we'll see how that works. Before we can actually do that, we do need to actually put in our grid position, put this into a grid position. So I'm just going to put it into a grid position down here. So dot grid, open brackets, column equals 0, and row, look, I really should do it in order simply because it's a bit confusing if I don't. It's not going to matter too much. Row equals 0, column equals 0. So that's going to place it up in the top left hand corner. So let's run that. So now we've got a nice space here. The next space I want to create is a space at the bottom. So let's have a look here. Let's go back to our space stuff. Bottom, always give logical names. Bottom space equals, and we're just going to grab that, copy that, make it easy, and then we're going to grab this, copy that, and go down here, dot grid, and this is going to be at the very bottom. So our furthest bottom we've got is row 3, so we want to say row 4 then, row equals 4, and we're going to put it at the bottom left hand side, so column equals 0. Okay, so let's run that and see what that looks like. So now we've got space here and we've got space here. I'd like to put some space over here. So again, far right space is probably what I'm going to call it. And I'm going to put it in the furthest column here. So I'm going to do that now. So what I've done is I've created a far right space variable, done it exactly the same over here, and put the grid so it was row 0 and column 4, which is way over here. So column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So now I would like to put a space straight down the middle here. And this is a little bit trickier because what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to alter all of these to go right towards 1. So first I'll create the space. So we'll call that middle space equals, and we'll do that label. Whoops. Label root text is equal to, and this one we may or may not do the exact same as over here. We can just make it slightly smaller perhaps, and then we want to put that, the middle space grid. This one needs to go in a very specific spot. We want it to go in the same place as the data entry one is at the moment, which is column 2. And then we're going to move these, everything from column 2. Anything that is column 2, we're going to make 3. Anything that's 3, we're going to make 4, etc. So we want that to be column 2. So row equals 0 and column 2, right? So we're going to now change all of these that are greater than column 2. We're going to change them to being a little bit further away. So greater than column 2, or column 2 and greater. No more. And this is the advantage of having all the grid positions all at once. We can just see and just adjust them as we go. So let's have a look at the original. Here's the original. We'll close that down. We're going to create space in here. So now we've created a space in here, a space here, space here. We could, if we wanted to create space in here, we could actually put some space at the top. So this is probably an interesting exercise to do. So let's have a look. And this place where the row is equal to 0 and the column is equal to 0. Now, what I need to now do is bring everything down. So I'm going to look at everything that has a row 0 and make it 1. Everything that's got a row 1, make it a 2, etc. So I'm just going to add all of these right down until I get to the top space. So it's probably easier to start from here and move our way up. Let's run that and see what that looks like. Now we've got a good looking thing here. It's starting to feel like it's got space around it. It's starting to feel like it's actually pleasant to look at. So this is how we can adjust our buttons, adjust our forms and get them right. Look forward to meeting you in the next video.